Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we put the business back in lady business. Hosted by Jennifer Justice, founder and CEO of the Justice Department, a management strategy and law firm that works with female and woke male entrepreneurs, executives, talent, brands, and creatives to build and maximize their wealth, focusing in the areas of tech, consumer product, finance, media, entertainment, and fashion. Jennifer interviews entrepreneurial women who have done it all, who will be sharing their secrets on all things business, especially as a woman. These highly successful women will share strategies and insights, including what not to do and what it takes to win. And now, here's your host, Jennifer Justice.
Hi, this is JJ, the host of this podcast, Taking Care of Lady Business. If you're here, you know my passion for making women rich. Did you know that men are 4 times more likely than women to negotiate their compensation packages? And that women are leaving about $1.5 million on the table by the time they're 60 by not negotiating? That's a lot of money, and I want it to stop. So I'm launching a course called Be the Boss of Your Career to show you how to get what you deserve. Our first live session is May 3rd, so go to www.thejusticedept.com to sign up for more information. I look forward to seeing you there and helping you get rich. Thanks to MedJet for supporting the Lady Business podcast. If you're hospitalized or your security is threatened while traveling, they can get you home. I'm a MedJet member and have been for years. Everyone who travels should be. Enroll before your next trip at medjet.com. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. I am Jennifer Justice. Today, you are going to have your life briefed, and you're going to have that done by Bonnie Wan, who is the author of a book called The Life Brief. It is a playbook for no regrets living. And it is so inspirational and it's so helpful. I can't wait to get into the meat of all of this. So welcome, Bonnie, and thank you for coming on to go over this.
It's a massive honor to be with you, Jennifer.
And anyone watching, I just want to show the book so you understand and when you see it. So as we are, just starting out, let's just get into it because there's so much to cover in this and that's so helpful for anyone who is just like, what am I doing with my life? And even if you know what you're doing with your life, like, am I still doing the right things with my life? Because you can always keep checking in. So tell us, what is the life brief?
The life brief in a nutshell is writing a creative brief for your life. And I'll explain that in a second. But I'm a career brand strategist in advertising. I work at the storied advertising agency, Goodby Silverstein and Partners. And for the last 30 years, I've been helping companies distill their essence into a single-minded, one-line, sharp, sticky, fuck yes statement that brings together who they are with their biggest ambition of where they want to go. And now I get to do that for people through the life brief, which is the same process of crystal clarity, distillation into that fuck yes essence and the answer to what do I want?
Yeah. And like when you put it that way, it's so obvious. And obviously, you know what you're doing because you just did that. You just like did a creative brief down to the essence of what this book is and what a life brief is. But it's like, of course, like you do it for companies. Why can't you do it for a person? Right.
Yes, but we're taught as people. It's interesting. I have so many strategists. I've met so many strategists, and it's novel for them to even think, wait a second, right? I can do that thing that I do for companies and brands and apply it to myself. Wait, I never thought of that. Sometimes the most obvious things are sitting right in front of us, but we just have to put our attention there.
Yeah, no, so true. So how do you start? Give us the overview of what a life brief is and the different steps, and then how do you get going on it?
Okay, so it's 3 simple parts to this method. It's get messy, get clear, and get active. It's so dead simple, yet hard to do for a lot of people because, and especially women, we don't allow ourselves to get messy. And especially women in the working world, in the corporate world, because we've practiced so hard to position ourselves as perfect, as polished, because we've kind of come up in business in moments of scarcity. There's only one opportunity for the woman, so we have to present ourselves so perfectly that this idea of getting messy is terrifying. Wait, what?
Yeah.
I'm going to allow myself to be contradictory. I'm going to allow myself to admit the things that I think go against my good girl conditioning, or I'm going to go against everything I've been taught or told. That feels dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So I often hear when I raise the driving question of the life brief, which is, what do you want? Not what are you in the mood for? What do you think you want? What do you feel like? But in your heart of hearts, what do you really, really want that maybe you haven't allowed yourself to admit yet? And that question can stir up a lot of things. And my first invitation in getting messy is whatever came up, put it on a page, write it
Mm-hmm.
down. And this isn't for anybody else's eyes but your own. This is a practice of permission, allowing whatever is inside you to come out onto the page. And it's a private practice. It's only between you and yourself. And that private practice is so important, that we get into relationship with ourselves, that we give ourselves permission to be nakedly honest. Because in that honesty is a freedom. There's a release and a relief for us to just admit those things. And I call this creative and courageous living. And the courage part is allowing yourself to admit what you want without having any certainty that you might get it.
Mm-hmm.
But the point of no regrets living is not about getting everything you want. It's about going for it.
Right.
If you can't admit it and
Yeah.
you can't declare it, you aren't going to go for it.
Can't acknowledge it. Yeah. So is that what you mean by messy? Because we're all so perfect and we're all supposed to like stay in this lane? Is that what the messy is?
The messy is allowing the truth to come out in lots of little bits and bobs. Sometimes it's contradictory. Sometimes it feels dangerous because our parents taught us something. Lots of people in our lives, our best friends, our teachers, society, culture, it's all in service of our safety, and in protection for us. But some of these intentions or stories that we've adopted or inherited along the way throughout our lives keep us playing small,
Yeah.
force us to hide, hold us back. And so getting messy is allowing the things that don't fully make sense yet, don't have a clear path, might fight against the status quo, might flirt with something disruptive or a need to shift how we show up, to let them out and come out on the page so that we can play with them as ingredients for part 2, which is getting clear.
So how long does this getting messy, portion last?
Doesn't have to last long. I say
Yeah.
it's not about how much time will it take, and it doesn't take a long time. What it does require is your presence,
Mm-hmm.
your openness, and your engagement. So you can do this in 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day for a week,
Right.
maybe 2 weeks, but that's it. It's not about, oh, I have to wait until I can book that 10-day vacation to Baja California, or I need to carve out time with my partner for an entire weekend, and steep in this. You can do both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can eke out 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks. And if you can't find 10 minutes, then do 5 minutes. If you can't find 5 minutes, I'm going to invite 3 minutes. Whatever it takes to make it inexcusable and unignorable.
Right. I love it. Okay. And you got to get really true with yourself. Not, so anything that just automatically comes up, right? That means something. Those are like the whispers that you're like, oh, wait, what just happened? Like that's, something that came up that I never thought I wanted.
That's exactly it. And if you do it for 2 weeks, what happens is you get to start to sort and separate the mood of the moment,
Yeah.
the drama of the moment from the things that look like patterns. that are
Right.
coming up every day in little hints or whispers or in big lightning strikes, right? So you start to, over that consistent but short period of time, you start to see the themes.
Mm-hmm.
Because our emotions of the moment can be so big and convincing, but over time they start to mellow out, right? You
Right.
see the spikes. Oh, yes, that was the day when XYZ was happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start to see what consistently is coming up over the whole 2 weeks.
Right.
And I have so many people who say, I told myself, I don't know what I want. And I told everyone around me, I don't know what I want. And then when I looked at what had come out in my notebook, it was so clear that I do know what I
Right.
want. So the stories in our heads
Yeah.
match the stories that come out onto the page. And my very first life brief was an example of that. The
Mm-hmm.
story in my head was that my marriage was broken and my husband was the problem.
Yeah.
And that was on repeat. It was on loop in my head until I dumped it out onto the page in my darkest hour because we had 3 kids under the age of 5. I was the sole breadwinner, 24-hour restaurant, the primary housekeeper and cook. You know, I was bitter. I was raging. And I thought, this is it. We're tumbling down the path to divorce.
Mm-hmm.
But then I cued my strategy reflex and I started just collecting the data, putting it onto the page and giving myself that naked, honesty allowance to have everything come out, no matter how bad it sounded, how terrifying it might have been. And the story that came out late at night was, oh, it's not my relationship with my husband that's broken. It's my relationship with time,
Yeah.
how I was spending my time, where I was putting my attention. I was saying yes to all these things I should have been saying no to, but just out of habit, out of people pleasing, out of a desire to help everyone but my family and my marriage and myself. And when I saw that, automatically my attention shifted.
Mm-hmm.
How do I reimagine my time?
Right. Okay, so then you got your get messy, and then you go to once you know that that's your messy. And is it one of those things that you think that you'll know it when you know it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about putting it in writing, I have a poet friend, Roger Housden, who says writing rearranges the furniture of our minds. I just
Mm-hmm.
love poets because they have this beautiful way with words. And it does. So when you put your thoughts, everything your answers to those questions out on the page, you create emotional distance with them. And then you also create more space in your mind for new
Yeah.
thoughts and new stories.
Yeah, yeah,
So you're
yeah.
doing 2 things at once.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you have the ingredients in front of you and they become the clay for clarity.
Right.
And the first job is to sort it, separate the meaningful. So what's sacred, what's non-negotiable, what's a must-have from the noise, the distractions, the meaningless. And then there's stuff that's just neutral.
Mm-hmm.
The roles and responsibilities we've signed up for, we just got to do it. And we
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't put so much weight or attention on those things. Those just are.
Right.
And then we get to zero in on the meaningful, the sacred, the must-haves. And that becomes the starting place for clarity.
Yeah.
Now we get to express that in ways that give us that fuck yes feeling.
Right.
I want more of that. I want to lean harder into that. I want to make that my fuel. And that's how getting clear works.
And you're talking, this is personal and professional. It can be anything. Yeah.
Yes, I've life briefed every part of my life. So I
Right.
have a marriage brief. I have a leadership brief for how I lead the agency. I have a wealth brief. I have a parenting brief, which I think saved one of my kids during the pandemic. It
Mhm.
aligned my husband and I, who we were on 2 different ends of the parenting spectrum in terms of
Mhm.
our styles and our beliefs. And that brief helped center us and gave us the sticky language to remind each other how we need to show up for our kids,
Yeah.
which is to love them through accountability.
Yeah.
Because it was too easy to hide or, distract ourselves in the darkest moments. And loving through accountability forced me at 2 a.m. to walk into the room when my son came home and kind of address what was going on and to call for responsibility, honesty, accountability. It gave me the strength when he was screaming, "Get out of my room, Mom, get out," when he was pushing me away, to stay in the conversation, even when it got hard and ugly. And I think that really saved him in that moment of darkness that he was going through during the pandemic.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So that's great. So you can have a bunch of different ones to help guide you in different areas of your life. Amazing. All right. So let's go on to step 2, action. I mean, clarity.
Action.
Sorry, clarity, step 2.
Well, we did the clarity because
Yeah.
it's the distillation, right?
Okay.
You start by sorting and
Yeah.
separating the meaningful, and then you dive into the meaningful and you write against it. What I call 5 declarative statements. And declarative means fuck yes. You get this feeling when you read those statements back to you. Yes, yes, that's what I want. And you read your body because every body is different. And each person will have different signals to what a fuck yes feels like. Some of you will feel butterflies, others will feel fire in your belly, others will feel goosebumps. But the importance is to get those statements, the 5 statements, to that feeling. And that's when you know you have it. And then you name the brief, right? So my parenting brief was love through accountability, but there were 5 statements that defined what that meant to me and my husband. But the name being sticky and sharp means it tattoos onto you. You don't have to remember all 5 statements. You don't have to carry it with you on a page or on your phone. Just remember the name of it and all of it comes into being. So when I said to my husband, hey, our agreement is to love him through accountability, go in that room and have that hard talk. And he would say that to me. We knew what it meant. We'd already defined it, right? And part 3 becomes the easier part. We always think action is hard. How do I show up? How do I do this differently? But when you get to that feeling of, yes, this is what I want, this is what matters most, action becomes a byproduct of that clarity. You start to see everything differently because you know what you want.
Yeah. It's like having your mission and vision. Like once you know what it is, right? Then it's like so much easier just to act on it. It's like, oh, obviously, this is what I'm going to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you got to get really clear. So can we talk about the 5 statements and how you do the 5 statements? What do they actually, how do you narrow it down to 5? Or what if you can't get 5? Like, what is that process?
Don't have to have 5. There are no rules. So I think this is the funny part. Everyone wants like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? You're doing it for yourself. So if it's working for you, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to break it down for the most common denominator for everyone. But if you have 3 fuck yes statements, great. You have 1, great. But what I do invite that you have something to expand and define the name. So love through accountability was not enough because it wasn't guiding me and my husband on how to show up. And part of loving him through accountability was focus on the long game of parenting. So that meant not just on the grades, whether his room was clean, whether he was, getting enough sleep. Those are the short term that feed the long term, but really look at the long term, right? What matters most and play that game. It also meant, I'm trying to remember all the statements we had, but it also meant giving him space to use his voice and for us to see who he is and who he's becoming. We were lecturing a lot, just talking at him. And we needed to pull back and listen more. And so loving him through accountability also meant creating space for us to learn, why did you make that wild, crazy decision? Why did you make that choice? And to try to understand and meet him somewhere in the middle. And the final statement for us in that brief was why this was so important is that we needed him to know that this is what real love looks like. That people who give him permission to do anything he wants, that's not real love. That's not real care. And we were in that room with him, as frustrating and infuriating as it felt, because we loved him. And that was really critical. So, the statements are about helping you define the finer points of what that brief is about.
Right. Yeah. And you have in the book about the t-shirt slogan.
Yes. And so I could, I have I would have a whole t-shirt collection at all my, right?
Right.
My brief was take our time, which was, I had this real problem with how I was spending my time that first down the road to divorce moment.
Yeah.
And take our time had 2 layers of meaning. The first was take back control over my time. Stop saying yes to all things just to please others. I need to start showing up for my marriage and myself and my children. But take our time also meant slow the hell down.
Yeah.
I'm impatient. I'm always running towards the future, but that wasn't serving us as a family. And I needed to slow down, edit out. And so that double meaning in 3 small words, that this is what I mean by getting sharp, right? Make the words pack the punch. And you don't have to do it for me, or, nobody has to be clever when they do this. The words just have to speak to you. And I have had people who came up with a symbol or came up, they've gotten creative with how they write their life brief. Some people are more visual. Some people have a song. Someone in a recent class I taught, their brief was Big Time Sensuality, Bjork. That song just evoked her brief. And now she's creating a new platform based on sensuality. She suffers from, ADHD. It grips her. And so she's very much about producing tactile experiences for people, get in touch with their bodies. And so whatever speaks to you, as long as it does speak to you.
I feel like there's a lingua franca partnership coming on with your life.
That would be amazing.
All right, so let's get down into like the action. Like, okay, now you got to start doing. And as we know, so many of us operate out of, scarcity, not abundance, or have these limiting beliefs that like we might say we want all these things, we might get clear, but like, we talked about, yes, I mean, it seems like action could be fun, but for a lot of people, it's like really like paralyzing, right? So walk us through that.
So the first step is when you get to that fuck yes clarity, to now shift the question. We started with what do you want? And now we shift to how do you want? And it's not how do I get what I want? It's how do you want to show up now differently? How do you want to shift? How do you want to serve in the time that you have in today? How do you want to serve your brief? So as we shift and pivot into the how do I want questions, now that puts it back into our action, our word, our decisions and choices. So if you can answer, how do I want to show up? We start to think about what could be different. And the smallest shifts create the biggest outcomes. And it is every time. I like to say that the life brief saved my marriage not once, but twice. And the second time was, we moved back to Northern California after we moved to Portland as a result of our first life brief. And then 6 years later, my agency made me a partner and head of strategy and said, but you have to really move back to San Francisco. And when we moved back, it tossed the salad. Everything went up in the air and we had to restructure our life, and we became really distant, my husband and I. And he asked me one day, are you still madly in love with me? what a shocking question after 17 years of marriage, 4 kids, all these moves. And the immediate answer coming up and into my throat was no. But I didn't say it. I'm smart enough not to let it out. But it did send me on a journey of asking myself, do I want mad love? And that was hell yes. I'm way too young to never experience that fire of desire again. But then the critical question was, do I want mad love with him? And after a lot more questions, I came to the answer yes. And I wrote that at the top of my marriage brief. I am ready to fall madly in love with my husband again. But how do I enact that?
Mm-hmm.
And it came in the smallest of ways. Usually he's our lead parent, stay-at-home dad. And I'm usually in the morning flying through the kitchen, already on my phone, grabbing my bag. He hands me a beautifully crafted cup of coffee because he's from Seattle. He loves that. That's art. It's oddly a reverse Mad Men, moment. And then I get one of our kids and to take them to school. And I just fly through the kitchen out the door. After writing this brief, I just spontaneously stopped in the kitchen. I turned to him and I said, thank you. And I leaned in and gave him a kiss. And the shock on his face was so terrifying to me that just that little act would surprise him so much. And even my daughter, who was in the kitchen, looked up like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Everyone could sense something different had happened, but it was so small. It was such a small moment of acknowledgement and appreciation. And then I kept going. And I sat in the car as I was starting it up thinking, why am I not doing that more?
Mm-hmm.
So I did that every day for those 5 days and invited him to show up differently. So we didn't have any words exchanged other than the thank you. And he grabbed my hand while we were grocery shopping, of all places. And then when I was working late one night, he leaned in and just got close because I think I had put up these walls that were communicating, don't get near me, don't touch me, I don't have time, I'm too busy, blah, 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 whatever I was signaling. And 3 weeks later, we went to renew our vows and had my mom come up and watch the 3 kids. And after, 3 nights, I woke up and I thought, what is this feeling I'm having? Could it be mad love? And so it was a lesson. And once we talked about it, he said, well, here's the thing we have to remember. This is always here for us to choose.
So true. Oh my God. What a great statement. Yeah.
So that's how the action part.
But you have to know that, to do it, right? You have to remind yourself, and for you to be able to lean over and kiss him, you have to think that he wanted that too, right?
Well, no, because I was clear I wanted it. That's why that getting it to that fuck yes place in the part 2 is so important. It stops mattering what other people want or what other people are going to give you permission to do. You have already gone through the get messy to get clear that, yes, this is what I want. God damn it. And it's sacred. It's non-negotiable. It's urgent and important. So I'm going for it. So that's why getting to that feeling in part 2 is so important to kick you over to what part 3, because otherwise you are waiting for permission, waiting for somebody else to say that it's okay, waiting for somebody else to bless you before you act. But if you've taken yourself to that place on your own, you're going to do it.
Bonnie, are you really telling a bunch of women to be completely selfish?
Yes. No, here's the great conversation. People always say this, isn't this a really selfish practice? And I say, no, it is self-centered though.
Yes.
And the difference.
This
is not about being self-obsessed or selfish or self-indulgent, maybe self-indulgence a little bit, but this is self-centered. When we are centered in ourselves, the ripple effects benefit everyone.
Right. True. That's absolutely true. You can only, just like taking care of yourself. How can you take care of others? Just like in the plane, put your oxygen mask on first. All of them. Yeah. Okay. So the small action, anything else in the action part that the audience needs to know about?
Well, I'm going to highlight what I just said because I don't want it to get lost. Because
Okay.
people always ask me, can I life brief my boss? Can I life brief my children? Can I life brief
Yeah.
my partner or spouse? And no, you can't. But when you start shifting, and this is what happened in the Mad Love example, is that when you start showing up differently in the even the tiniest of ways, it's an invitation and communication and signal to everyone around you to show up and respond differently. And that's how we create change.
So I know that you also go into what happens if you don't do something or fail, in the book, like in the end. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, everything has a doorway on the other side of it. And we often mistaken a failure or a mistake as a loss. And I think that's okay. And we should mourn those losses. And once we mourn them and grieve them, we can see the opportunity that they actually open up. It's funny. I am just pausing because I just gave a talk at South by Southwest, and
Mm-hmm.
I have spoken here the last 3 or 4 years in a row, and this was a big one. And I changed it up, and I felt like I fell on my face. I felt like I didn't feel that I was in my power, that I was in my voice, because I had changed things up so dramatically that I didn't, it wasn't surging through me. And I was really hard on myself. And my discovery in that moment was an insight about myself that I'm still living up to that inner perfectionist.
Yeah.
And I wasn't enjoying the moment because right afterwards, I had a book signing and my book sold out. The line was so long, but I was still reeling from my own disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
And I find this with a lot of people I meet, that we hold these stories about ourselves, about who we need to be in the world, that keep us from relishing and enjoying what's unfolding right in front of us.
Right. Yeah, that's, those, and if anybody's done any executive coach or therapy or anything, it's like talking about these limiting beliefs and things that, like, if you look at the facts were you had a line outside the door and you sold out of your books. And I'm sure just as many, if not more, people were there for your speech. But because you did not think you personally had done 130%, you were like kicking yourself and saying it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
had very good friends around me who said exactly that. So I invite people to surround themselves. There's a whole chapter about cast your dream team, right?
Hmm.
The people who are going to reflect back to you the truth when the doubt creeps in,
Hmm.
when you're being hard on yourself and kicking yourself in the ass. And there were people around me who said, look at the evidence. I'm going to hold up the evidence, and I'm going to keep holding it up until you see what the world sees.
Yeah.
And so I invite everyone, we can't go at this alone. So know who your team is,
Hmm.
who's on your board,
Yeah.
who's going to hold you up when you fall down or you feel down, who's going to nudge you further out when you feel shy or inhibited or insecure, and they're going to push you to the full maximum of your potential. Who's going to tell you the truth when everyone is just telling you what they think you want to hear?
Hmm.
Know who those people are and ask them to play that role
Yeah.
in your life.
Definitely get your own personal advisory board. And they might not even be the people that you're like want to go have drinks with. They
No,
might not be your childhood friend that, best friend for 40 years. They literally could be completely opposite. They're the people who are really there and show up for you. Yeah. In a different
exactly.
way. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then I mean back to a little bit, on the other side of it, what if the truth was you didn't do so well, It's okay too, right? You're not perfect. Like
Yeah.
everybody has, a bad day, and maybe that was just fodder for like, okay, well that direction of the it doesn't, of the speech doesn't like flow through me. It's not natural for me. Maybe that is not my, speech brief for my life brief for my speeches, my leadership.
Yes. And I
And it's
had a
okay.
woman who came up to me who said, I asked my partner to do this practice with me, and he said no. And it made me realize, oh, he doesn't want to be in partnership. And that was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized in the long run, I'm better off for it.
Yeah. Wow, this is all so life-changing and groundbreaking, but like you all have like everyone has the tools, right? You have the tools to do it. You can do it. I strongly suggest you go buy Bonnie's book and start your life briefing journey ASAP in all different aspects of your life because I know it's super helpful. And once you do have that tagline, that t-shirt slogan of what you really need, like it makes it much easier to get it as long as you don't get in your own way. Accept the consequences and those things, that's part of it too.
Yeah.
This is awesome. I mean, I know that you're still in South by Southwest and you want to get out and about, so I can't hold you much longer. And while this doesn't naturally tie in this question, it's the one question I ask everybody, and that is, what is the worst advice you've ever received, given this whole context?
Okay, I'm going to throw my parents under the bus. So in high school, I wanted to be an artist. Creativity was in my blood. I also love studying human motivation, which is what I get to do now. And I get to be a creative. But they told me, we will not pay for you to go to art school because artists are poor people. And when I got into advertising many years later, as a strategist, I had to say to my parents, hey, mom and dad, guess who makes the big bucks in advertising? Oh, it's the creative people.
Yeah.
But I also think that we all have our own journeys,
Yeah.
and it wasn't the advice I wanted to hear, and it wasn't good advice in the long run. It also set me up to find my own experience and believe in my own learnings about life. And it also taught me not to tell my kids the same type of stories.
Yeah. I know it's hard though, right? Learn from me. Yeah. Well, Bonnie, thank you so much. Again, it is called The Life Brief by Bonnie Wan. Can you tell everybody where to find you, where to find the book?
Yes, you can find me at thelifebrief.com or on Instagram, Bonnie Wan Official. And the book is everywhere that books are sold. But for those of you with Prime, Amazon's an easy place.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time, especially when you're out at South by having some fun now that your big speech is over. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.